Well, looks like it's that time of year again. You know, it's kind of funny that whenever a year starts to approach its end, you inevitably look back on all the stuff you've done over the course of this time. Whether it's the year of your graduation, or now learning new responsibilities as you garner across this long, harrowing world called life, or you'll be me and end up consuming at least 500 episodes of anime to simply pass the time. So yes, if you haven't been paying attention to the thumbnail already, today we are going to be covering what is personally my top 10 favorite anime of 2023. Emphasis on personally, there's no objective factor in this whatsoever. Also, just a side note, this list will not be covering any sequels, because if it did, then this list would be completely overloaded as to what my final decision would be. So, sorry to you Vinland Saga and Jujutsu Kaisen fans, you still deserve all the gains you get. So strap your trousers up, take your eyes off of TikTok for a few minutes, and let us travel down to this memory lane that is once 2023. And now, we start at the bottom. High school anime are pretty much a dime a dozen nowadays. While you can make a certain setting work with whatever story it is you want to tell, it can get very difficult to garner a captivating audience to continue watching without veering into cliche territory that inevitably renders the entire series as just another bloated trope-filled rom-com or harem-style show among the pile. But fortunately for this year alone, there were a couple of anime series that I've managed to stand out from the crowd, and for that sample goes to what is the contender for my number 10 pick, Skip and Loafer. Skip and Loafer is, to summarize quickly, about a girl living by the countryside named Mitsumi Irakura, who begins the story of her life by moving to the city of Tokyo, so she can attend a prestigious high school that, at least in her eyes, will fulfill her lifelong ambition to become a political figure that will enable her to bring changes to her rather empty hometown for the better. The premise might sound a bit heavy at first glance, but really this is mainly all about a new girl joining in a completely different environment unlike her own, where she encounters as many new people and even getting to befriend them along the way. While that might not seem to do much for the narrative plot-wise, it manages to elevate with what we are given that makes it enough to stand out amongst the crowd, thanks to its engaging cast of characters, the bountiful yet also relaxing atmosphere, and you've got a recipe for what's arguably one of the most heartwarming anime you'll see all year. Mitsumi, in my opinion, is the perfect catalyst for this type of role, as while she does constantly feel agitated yet excited for what's to come in store for her, that doesn't stop her from straying what she believes in and how she's determined to deal with whatever circumstances that comes their way. And that's especially prevalent with her dynamic with the popular poster boy Sosuke. Categorically speaking, it's more of a slice-of-life type of show rather than anything else set in high school. It's chilling, it's heartfelt, and all in all, it's a really good barrier to entry whenever you need a quick pick-me-up every now and then. Now, VR MMOs are kinda in a similar vein to high school rom-coms, whereas most of the time whenever a new show that garners that premise comes out, it is always overlooked due to the sheer fact that in the end, what you'll be witnessing is just another SAO clone. It is by far one of the most blatantly common settings you'll ever find in a power fantasy anime, and it's becoming more obvious over time that, just like the isekai genre, 90% of anime like this just end up getting buried in an ever-engrossing amount of slob that no one would dare veer across. But what about the shows that do manage to avoid said pile? Well, you get something that's not only good in a general sense, but even stands on its own legs to actually compete with other anime outside its own category. And let me tell you, Shangri La Frontier is the most gaming anime that I have ever gamed to veer across. That will be checked off on my recording list, thank you very much. Let me just clarify that I have never seen a gaming-based show that not only manages to take off every box on how to make a show like that done right, but it even manages to handle all the mechanics on how the game works properly, and what our circuit protagonist is able to whiff off from every situation he's put himself in without it feeling like it got pulled out of its ass. Now, to reiterate this is a story about Rakuro Hizotome, an ordinary high school student whose main hobby is to beat every broken, every bug-ridden trash game that has ever graced the sun. But soon after beating his last one, he then comes across a certain MMO who's been gaining a certain traction of popularity over the past few months. A game that's not really trashy at all and is actually a pretty well received game that has been garnering many traces that really anyone can enjoy while playing so by sheer curiosity alone. Our hero, for example, decides to take a plunge at it, and from there on, it's a non-stop journey filled with rare monster enemies that gives you permanent debuffs when they beat you, a guild whose main activities prioritize killing other players in-game, and a highly advanced NPC formed in the shape of a talking bunny.
All of this just works.
I mean, shit man, what more can you ask for? Let me preface this by saying that Shangri La Frontier is without a doubt an anime that is purely made by gamers for gamers. And that's pretty much all I can wrap up about, so do yourself a favor and give this a shot, especially when you're a certified gamer like me. It's no big secret that whenever you get an adaptation for what is by bounds the most well-known and highly acclaimed manga magazine in Japan, Weekly Shonen Jump, you are almost certainly bound to get a hit. Plain and simple. However, even despite the sheer success of Jujutsu Kaisen and Demon Slayer this year, there has been one new anime to come out from Shonen Jump, and to me, it just boggles the mind that not a lot of people have been talking about this show, even despite its carrying what I believe to be one of the most original summaries that could be brought into the shonen battle genre. Maybe it's due to the fact that Disney thought it'd be a good idea to give it a 10-episode delay for streaming rights services, which thus renders any possible chance of garnering attention with the general public. Seriously though, Undead Unlock needs to be talked about more often because while it is admittedly going through its infant phase at the moment, I firmly believe that this show has the potential to become one of the most insane yet highly enjoyable rides that most anime fans will ever come across. Or at least that's from what I've heard from the manga readers, like, Jesus Christ, never shut up about it. Wait, hold on, I think I'm forgetting something. Oh right, the premise. So, this one's gonna be a bit of a doozy, so I hope you'll be following on this real closely. So, this is in the world where a certain amount of people have been naturally gifted with specific powers that allows them to negate any sort of law that obeys the rules of how we function and perceive reality. They are what's called negators. One of these negators we follow is an estranged girl named Fuko Izumo, whose misfortune has ended up following her throughout her life for 10 plus years, thanks to her unknown ability that causes anyone that comes into physical contact with her to suffer many varied unlucky situations. You see what I'm getting at here? Set on unaliving herself, she then comes across a chance encounter with an unnamed man who, while she dismissed at first sight, she then discovers over time that he has also garnered an ability that's similar to hers, with the exception being that he is basically unkillable. So in order to being granted a death that can permanently put him into the ground, he decides to team up with Fuko, to whom she begrudgingly accepts as a favor for saving her life from the people who are hunting her. And from now onward, it's a never-ending journey across multiple locales and adventures in which they both come to realize that their goal isn't about as simple as you may think. Now on paper, this sounds like a story that's just begging for tons of insane battles as well as many crazy twists along the way. And to the anime's credit, it definitely provides that in the battle department, which isn't surprising considering it's made with the same production team behind Fire Force, albeit a more consistent one story-wise. I really hope that this anime kicks it off in strides in its later course, because this really does have the chance to be something special. But for now, we'll just leave it to the other ranked shows on this list. Okay, real tangent here quick. Throughout my years of watching anime, I don't think that there has ever been a show that's ever been primarily based in historical China. Well, Kingdom kinda counts, I guess, but really, who even talks about that abomination? Anyway, what I found sort of baffling in a sense is that there has rarely ever been a show that likes to take a gander on what would an anime be like if it was set in that era. And that's a bit of a shame because personally, I just find Chinese history to be way more interesting when compared to the land of the so-called rising sun. And I just instantly caused a riot among the comment section, haven't I? Thankfully for this year, there was indeed an anime that I've managed to scratch that personal itch of mine that leaves none other than my number 7 pick, the Apothecary Diaries. So here's the TLDR. An apothecary's daughter named Mao Mao starts off a story by getting kidnapped, and is thus forced to be serving into the rear palace in an era during the emperor's reign, whose consorts and serving women live in a sprawling complex known as the Huonggong. Is that how you pronounce it right?
Huonggong.
Now, during her time of servitude, the last thing a Mamo could ever want is to receive unnecessary attention during her time of said serving, especially with a sharp awareness of how things are perceived in the rear palace. That is, until she meets a chance encounter with the head eunuch, Jinchi, whom thanks to certain circumstances that leads him to discovering that Mao Mao is not all she initially appears to be on first sight. So he decides to appoint her as the lady-in-waiting for one of the Emperor's top-leading consorts. Hence, during her time as a now lady-in-waiting, Mao Mao soon after finds herself in a slew of multiple medical mysteries that enables our reluctant heroine to go full-on Sherlock Holmes mode and proceed to unravel what other conspiracies there are left to be ravaging the inner circle of the Emperor's reign. Okay, I just want to cap off real quick by saying something. Do you see this girl right here? As a righteous connoisseur of a group known to many people as men of culture, I hereby declare Mao Mao to be the best girl of 2023, bar none. To be honest, I don't know what to say about why that is. I mean, on the one hand, she's got this gremlin-like energy that she imbues with her day-to-day activities, to the point where you can't help but feel charmed by it, despite one of the other things that might weird you out on her is that she unironically enjoys drinking poison for a living. But on the other hand, you really can't help but feel admired by just how acutely aware Mao Mao is when it comes to solving abstract mysteries, by which, thanks to the period it's set in, some of the resolutions never really comes across as feeling unearned, and even manages to expand upon what it's like to experience the inner workings of a servant being beheld by royalty. Yet, somewhat, no matter how deep the rabbit hole goes, it never seems to uncover itself fully over time, and that expression can be utterly felt with our heroine. Plus, she seems like she could be a really fun person to hang out with. Just saying. While this form of narrative play might cynically imply to take on a more episodic format, which it kinda does, but at least it's always provided with the ongoing context, at least for me, with the direction this series is currently heading in, I'm fully willing to give it the benefit of a doubt because man, this show rules, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not alone in that either. Alright, so this time, I'm gonna do a quick flex and try to tell you guys on what's my next ranking in just 3 words. Alright, here it goes. Scott Pilgrim Anime. Now cue the montage. You know, it's kind of funny to me that in a never-ending stream of licensed properties getting an anime adaptation, like seriously, just recently there's already been an announcement for a Terminator one, there's always something interesting that you can find around the corner, and by far, one of the most eager properties that highly deserve the anime treatment is none other than Scott Pilgrim. And wouldn't you know it, they managed to make that dream a reality. And not only does this anime retain what made both the comics and the movie so good to begin with, but it even manages to diverge from what the core narrative is supposedly about, and in my opinion at least, it pulls it off with spectacular fashion. Sure, while not most people will be happy about it just presenting itself as a situation where, what if Scott gets killed off by the first X? Which, by the way, does not count as a spoiler, it literally says so on the title via semicolon, so take that what you will from it. But honestly, I don't mind it. Like, we've already got the comic book and the film to retread the original story from anyway, so how about we change things up a bit? And that's precisely what happened, as along for the ride, the central focus of the story now shifts to Ramona trying to figure out this mystery behind Scott's quote-unquote death. And what's really made me like the show even more is now that with our main poster boy gone, we each get a bunch of episodes of Ramona's evil exes getting the spotlight, which is great because one of my biggest complaints from the original source material is that most of them tend to be underutilized at best, and in the most simplest terms, they're just mostly there to serve as plain obstacles for the main hero to get over. But here, you see how well they've been brought into their own arcs, and that goes especially well with how they interpret their own dynamic with Ramona. I wish I could go on, but any more than that would just be going into sheer spoiler territory at this point, so please, if you were already a fan for either the comic books or the film to begin with, then please give this one a watch. You won't regret it a single bit. But if you aren't affiliated with both these properties already, well, we all gotta start somewhere, I guess. Heavily Delusion is a bit of an enigma, to say the least, because when you start the first episode, you are just left wondering as to what the hell is even happening, and then moments later, the show decides it would be a good idea to just drop you in a post-apocalyptic world where it provides no straight answer as to why it became that way. Add to that with another narrative in which you've got a bunch of kids cooped up in a rather strange facility whose main reasoning for nurturing them is also left unexplained. There are 2 main plot points that follow each of our parallel main leads, who in which one is trying to find a place that is deemed to be heaven, while the other just has a bunch of weird shit happening to them. Yet the journey it takes for the former to reach that goal of theirs makes up for easily being one of the most adventurous, tense, and sometimes downright horrifying pieces of storytelling that I have ever witnessed in an anime. This show just oozes intrigue, setting up mysteries left and right without feeling too complicated in the process, while also building up the world that our main characters have been put into to great effect. This in particular goes out to the main pair from the outside, Maru and Kiruko, and let me tell you, the witty banter between these two kids are some of the most fun I've ever had in ages. Not to mention that the overall aesthetic of the anime looks gorgeous, with some of the scenes that look way more polished and well animated than it has any right to be. And to be honest, it's overall a pretty refreshing take on the post-apocalyptic setting, where most of the time they're usually depicted with a pretty bleak tone in mind. And that goes out to like 90% of these types of stories told this way, where cities are in scrapes, most resources are on an all-time low, people keep dying all the time, and now they're turning gay. Now, while it does retain some of these aspects, especially the monsters, because holy shit, some of them are just straight up nightmare fuel, but even despite that, Heavily Delusion doesn't feel like a place where absolutely everything has come into ruin. In fact, the closest setting that I can compare it to would be Nier Automata, whereas while both these settings may depict a world that has been completely deserted, there still lies a few hints of humanity to keep them from being complete husks, and that's what I really enjoy about it when watching the show. Cause sure, while the core narrative does indeed rely on the whole mystery aspect of it all, I'm just a big fan of settings where you can get to explore so many different places without feeling like you're veering off into the danger zone, or as in some unlucky cases, the danger comes directly to you. So, all in all, it may be safe to say that this is gonna be the sleeper hit of 2023, so if you haven't seen it already, do yourself a favor, and go watch it on Disney+. Hey, wouldn't you know, it's that idol anime in which I've already made a previous video about. So, you gotta preface your opinion somewhere. I'm not gonna delve too much into this ranking for mainly two reasons. One is that I've obviously talked about it already before, and two is that it's pretty difficult to tell someone who's new to this anime without ending up spoiling the one factor that kicks off the whole narrative to begin with. So, here's a real quick TLDR. So it's about a gynecologist who works at a hospital in the middle of nowhere and who happens to be a massive fan of a well-known idol, Ai Hoshino, whom by extreme coincidence happened to end up attending the same hospital he works for, as for the hidden fact that she is catering for her pregnancy, which our main guy is assigned to. Few weeks pass by, and once the time was ready for Ai to carry her pregnancy, our main lead ends up getting murdered by a stalker who's promptly showed up on the exact same day. But once he thinks he's heading into the afterlife, it becomes immediately apparent that he has now been reincarnated into being Ai's newborn child along with a twin. And thus begins a journey of never-ending turnabouts of the entertainment industry, yada yada yada. Then there's something to do with a murder case, there's discourse on the internet toxicity, and that's all I have to say about it, so go watch the first episode already, or at least the video that I made it if you want more input. Let me ask you an important question. Do you hate working? Do you hate the fact that you're being exploited by a company who does not give 1 ounce of your free time? Do you constantly feel like you're trapped in a never-ending grind that you just can't get yourself out of? Now apply that to all of the above and then ask yourself this. If by chance the world was going to end tomorrow, how would you react to all that? Or as for the case for Tendo Akira, how would you react to the moment everything you knew and loved has been taken over by zombies? Well... And right there you get Zone 100, Bucket List of the Dead. Yes, this anime is all about a guy who's finally been enraptured over the fact that he no longer has to work for a company that's been laboring him for 3 years straight. And you thought anime is all about friendship. And with that freedom being granted means he has decided to make a bucket list that presents up to 100 things that he fully desires to do before he inevitably becomes part of the Horde. Now what really stands out to me is that unlike in most zombie stories, this is by far one of the most lighthearted stuff to come across, and I'm sort of surprised that it took this long for this kind of premise to occur, especially when you consider the onslaught of zombie saturation during the mid-2000s. Add to that the insanity of some of its action scenes, where for example, you got Akira facing off a live shark that has eaten divers in its belly that also serves as its feet, then you know you're in for one hell of a time. However, what makes this anime so special, in my opinion, in regards to its quality, is how it juxtaposes with what it means to live. Whereas most zombie stories tend to depict a group of survivors in a desperate attempt to stay alive for God knows how long, Zone 100 takes that element and transforms it into a note of levity while still retaining the sincere desires to live your life in the best possible outcome despite the whole world crumbling around you. And as a whole, when you take a look at how the whole series is branched out, you later realize that despite having its most fun moments in between, this anime isn't afraid of pulling punches when it comes to providing commentary that dismisses ongoing issues with today's society, particularly in Japan. So in a way, it's a really clever method to underlie the value of what it's like to live in the present day and how you are supposed to come to terms with it once everything has come under ruin. Overall, I really dig this show a lot, and to me, it's sad to see it get brought down a bit thanks to its production issues that delayed its last 3 episodes for the entire remainder of this year. It's pretty ironic when you think about it. So yeah, we are now officially at number 3, and as for the next 2, well, you can kinda guess where this is going next. Yeah, this one is goated. It's kinda wild to me to imagine that even with a whole conglomerate of shows, particularly those categorized in the fantasy genre, rarely have I ever witnessed a show that just feels earnest in the way it depicts what it's trying to tell. If you can't tell who the main character is already, this is Frieren. She's an elf. And one important thing to consider is that elves tend to have very long lifespans compared to other species. We'll get back to that later. So the story begins with a party who's already verged to the end of their 10-year-long journey to defeat the Demon King, and that party just happens to have Frieren along for the ride. They celebrate, look upon the stars, and then they split off waves with Frieren taking the first helm to do so. Then a year passes by, and then 5 years, and then 10, then 20, and so forth. By the time Frieren returns to the town that began her initial journey, 50 years have passed, and some of the party members she last saw during that time looked completely different from what they used to be. And so, they reunite again, and look upon the star once more. And then, the inevitable happens. It's really quite funny when you think about it, how the moment it was time to leave off for something you want to personally do, it can be difficult to discover just how precious there's that one thing that brings so much value to your life until you later realize it's gone forever. To put input on Frieren, it's because of her elongated lifespan that all of the stuff happening to her is due to her perspective on not investing enough time to deeply show affection for the people she cares. And that's the kind of tone that's rightfully hard to pull off. But man, when it does, you are just left with a huge sprawl of emotion crawling out of you, yet you're somehow elevated by the fact that, hey, maybe I should invest more time in the stuff I care about, because god damn it, I will swear to live out my life with no regrets, no matter how much time has passed. And that messaging, or at least how I interpret it, is presented even more beautifully with both its visuals and the soundtrack, which by coincidence just happens to be composed by the same guy who's behind one of my most favorite anime of all time. Out of all the anime I've seen this year, it's by far the closest thing I can say to it being a masterpiece. The animation, its characters, the world it's setting in, all of these elements collaborate so well with each other that it easily makes up for being one of the most profound anime that anyone has ever seen in recent memory. And you know what? It earns that status, and I cannot be more grateful for this show than I ever could. And now, it's time for the finale. There has always been a condition that whenever something pops up, whether it's an anime, a game, movie, or just anything, there have been few things that are so well regarded in life that everyone who's seen it even once would unanimously agree upon that they're the best of their serving medium. Now, I firmly believe that there's really nothing that accurately matches that description. Whether if it's The Godfather, Full Metal Alchemist, or Ocarina of Time, sure, they're one of the most critically acclaimed pieces of the medium they served at the time, but can they truly resonate with everyone who's ever seen or played any of these aforementioned on an emotional level? Well, I can certainly account for that, and I can humbly say that out of all of these three, there's only one that I fully believe to deserve the hype, and that's gonna be discussed another day. So, why am I bringing this up? I mean, while the show that I picked as my anime of the year can easily be seen as someone else's, there's obviously going to be a tension of what certain anime defines a certain year. And I know I said I'm not going to be ranking any sequels on this list, but if I were forced to, I'd definitely see Vinland Saga take the prize. However, this one is also very worth a contender, mind you. One that which I believe not only deserves the promise it swears to uphold and deliver, but could potentially define what anime should be represented as in the near futures to come. Enter Pluto. Now, where to start? If you guys have never even heard of the mangaka Naoki Urasawa up until now, then what the hell are you doing with your life? It's not a big secret in both the anime and manga community that when it comes to most of his works, this man rarely ever misses. Like, do I seriously need to talk about the magnum opus that is Monster? I haven't actually seen it yet, but I have heard 20th Century Boys, and please, for the love of God, read this manga. I'm aggressively losing my mind over the fact that I have no one else to talk about it! So this story is essentially a loose adaptation that's based on a tiny manga series that you may not have heard of before called Astro Boy. It takes place in the far future where both robots and humans are able to coexist. However, there have been a string case of murders, one of which included a robot that served in a traumatic war period that took place before the events of the current story taking place. And this investigation is led by Geschicht, who, fun fact by the way, just also happens to be a robot. And as soon as he begins to uncover the mystery behind these strings of murders, he later realizes that there is an entity, one that is planning to destroy every one of each specialized robots that have participated in the said war, including Geschicht. And from there, the narrative keeps unfolding to a slew of unbagged revolutions, the morality between good and evil, and what it's like to experience a world that only knows how to prioritize hate. It's a really deep show to go under, especially when you consider the fact that maybe robots and humans aren't really that different from each other after all. despite being able to live with each other for centuries, and I'm not just talking about whether robots can commit demonetization. Discrimination as a whole can be a really hot topic to discuss, but this series, apart from its few shortcomings, manages to elevate what it means for those who don't take part in it, but confronts the question as to why. Combine that with other themes that discusses morality on a larger scale, and how one can easily shift from being a good person to a downright monster, and you've got a show that pretty much anyone can witness some moments that fully resonates with them, regardless of how it's executed. Let's face the facts, nothing is really ever perfect. Hell, even among Urasawa's other works, I'd still say that 20th Century Boys is beyond miles better. But with what the team behind the anime has gone through to adapt the sheer magnitude of a story, to be able to not only bring it to the silver screen, but has also reignited the fire and sheer passion that most anime fans in general have for the medium. So, if there is anything you can take from this list at all, it will be to go watch this anime right now, because it truly deserves the top contender for not only my anime of the year, but potentially being one of the best shows to come out in a long-ass time. So, here you have it. This is my top 10 anime of the year. It took me a while to put this whole thing together, but I hope it was worth the wait. If you guys enjoyed this video, well, be sure to look out for what I'll be making next in the near future. In any case, this is Migs, and I will see you all next time.